Good evening, everyone, and welcome virtually to the Strand. My name is Andrea, and I'm on the marketing team at the Strand. We're happy to have everyone here tonight. And before we launch into our discussion with Amy Poeppel, we want to share a little bit with you about the Strand and its history. So the Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass-Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support, especially in the last few months. We know without our loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be where we are today. Tonight, we're excited to have with us Amy Poeppel, who is celebrating the release of her third book, Musical Chairs. Amy is also the author of Small Admissions and Limelight. Her writing is appeared in the New York Times, the Rumpus, Literary Hub, Working Mother, and the Belladonna. She and her husband have 3 sons, and they split their time between New York City, Germany, and the wilds of Connecticut. Joining Amy tonight is Marcy Dermansky. Marcy is the author of novels Very Nice, The Red Car, Bad Marie, and The Twins. Her writing has appeared in McSweeney's, Salon, the Indiana Review, and elsewhere. She lives in New Jersey with her daughter. And now, without further ado, please help me welcome Amy Poeppel and Marcy Dermansky.
Sure. Amy.
Marcy.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to be here with you today on your book launch day. Look, it's Musical Chairs.
Honestly, they said to me, who's the dream person that you would want to spend your time with? And I said, Marcy. I just would love to do this with Marcy. It was supposed to be in person.
I know, right? And then I was like, maybe I'll be in Germany this summer, but here I am, so it's all good.
Yes, yeah. I know. And this is good. No one's going to get sick.
Nope.
It's all fine. So thank you. And thank you, Strand, for hosting us. Very much appreciate it. And Marcy, I just have to tell you, very recently, I'm a huge fan, as you know. I loved Very Nice. Loved Very Nice. I loved The Red Car so much. And I'm finally late to the party, but I finally read Bad Marie, and oh my God, like, this book is a wild ride with
a little bit crazy. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's so nice. But we're at your event, so it's really good. But I mean, I know you're going to read for me something soon, but one thing I loved when I read your book was that we both wrote books that were set in Connecticut. And I know in my last book, Very Nice, there's even like a line, which I feel really strongly, having had not spent very much time, where I say that Connecticut is like a dream. And so, and then you read Musical Chairs, and Connecticut is like a dream, but the house also, like in one of the very early scenes of Musical Chairs, the main character, Bridget, finds herself electrocuted because the wiring is going out and she's in the emergency room. So maybe it's not quite a dream. And do you want to talk about that before you read a little bit? Or
it's definitely not quite a dream.
Seems like one to me still.
Yeah. And I also remember when you talked about, because there are 2 houses in this book, and one is the fancy house, and then the other is the house that can electrocute you if you're not careful. And it's
not a dream house.
And the paint is peeling and the fence is falling down. But like you, because I remember you telling the story of how you were invited to a very fancy house, and it kind of got you thinking as you started to write Very Nice.
Right.
I have these lovely friends, April and Jamie, who have this beautiful house in Connecticut. And that's the house that I call the castle in the book. It's really lovely. And so for me to be able to even picture that house, it just helped a lot that somebody kind and generous had actually invited me. The falling down part was easier for me to write about.
That's your own experience.
That's my own experience.
I think it's really funny because usually people are worried that you don't want to let them into your lives because you're going to like steal their personal stories. But in our case, we both stole people's houses.
Yes.
Right? And so that can happen. So everybody should be warned about that when they invite you over for dinner.
Yes, think twice before you invite me or Marcy, because your house in a book. Yeah. But it was.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your book? I just jumped right into talking to you because I like to talk to Amy. So there you go.
I'm so happy to see your face. I think we're all feeling a little isolated these days.
Very much so.
Something that like involves a community. I'm just so appreciative. I'm looking at the chat here and so many amazing people.
Going crazy. You have so many fans and friends. It's nice.
God, it just makes my day. But yes, so there is a book.
Okay, yay. I'll do that.
So musical chairs, it took me a long time to write this book. There's a big, boisterous cast of characters in this book. And I wanted to sort of look at a few different things. I wanted to talk about adult kids moving back home, because I think so many parents these days, not just because of our pandemic, but even before that, it's getting harder and harder for kids to graduate from college and just immediately be completely self-sufficient and dependent. And I've been reading a lot of stories and talking to a lot of parents about their kids moving back home. And I just think it's lovely and funny, and it can be annoying for the kids. It can possibly be annoying for the parents too. And I just felt like there was a lot of room for humor in that. So I was just excited to write a little bit about, a story about a woman my age, so a woman in her 50s, who has adult kids who move back home, and her summer that she has planned goes completely off the rails and not the way
she thinks she's going to have this completely romantic love idol, and that's just not what happens at all.
And nothing quite like being broken up by email. And I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's okay.
I think that's okay. Yeah, I think we only process certain things, and then it comes back to when you're reading. You're like, oh, I remember when Amy said that.
Exactly. Yeah. So her summer does not go as planned at all. I also have her father, who's in almost 90 and announces that he's getting married. So she has the kids coming home and their problems, and she has her father starting out this huge new change in his life. And meanwhile, her career is a little bit not on the rocks exactly, but she and her very dear friend, Will, are part of this piano trio, and they have once again lost their violinist. So they're forever in search of filling that empty chair. And in an ensemble, I just think it's an interesting dynamic. And if you pull someone out and substitute with somebody else, that's going to change everything. I mean, that's going to change the chemistry completely of the group. So I wanted to sort of play with that idea a little bit too, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't know, unless you might have changed your mind. Do you want to read the opening scene of the book to give people like an idea of like how Bridget sounds, or do you want to skip that and just talk to me? We can go either.
I want to talk to you, but I'm actually going to do is going to end up being the world's shortest.
I love that.
Ever.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is better than if I just announced I was going to do the world's longest book reading ever, which I think would
really?
Wow. Yes. This is going to be the world's shortest. So this is the opening scene of the book, so there's no need for me to give you any background whatsoever. I'm going to try to do this without my reading glasses, but I may have to put them on.
Okay.
So this begins 27 years ago. For the fourth time in less than 12 hours, Bridget was doing something that could get her pregnant. Staring up at the acoustic tile ceiling, she sincerely hoped the doctor, an elder gentleman who had an air of celibacy about him, wouldn't be able to tell that she'd already been pretty spectacularly inseminated 3 times since midnight. And she had to remind herself, on the off chance that the doctor could detect the cost-free sperm occupying the territory where he was currently placing very expensive Ivy League sperm, that she shouldn't feel guilty about the situation she found herself in. She'd made a clear-headed, deliberate, positive decision to have this procedure done, regardless of what had happened last night, which is why she had shown up after almost canceling the appointment earlier that morning. She'd settled on one point. She wanted a baby. So all she had done, really, was up the chances. What difference did it make from whom the sperm came, as long as it came from a well-chosen, clever, handsome donor? The donations in Bridget's uterus, whether freely given or contractually obtained, were specimens of the finest order. With her feet in the stirrups, memories of the previous evening went through her mind, and she smiled. And that's all there is to it, the doctor said, snapping off a surgical glove. Not so romantic, but it may do the trick. Super, Bridget said. I guess we'll have to wait and see. After lying flat on her back for the requisite period, she left the office, hungover, but glowing. She found a payphone and called Will, who picked up on the first ring. I was about to call the police to report you missing, he said. Are you hungry? Meet me at that place. I was worried, he said. The egg place or the croissant place? Egg, she said. Half an hour. Love you. She got on the crosstown bus and took a window seat, deciding that she would enjoy this little moment of not knowing one way or the other, of standing on a threshold. She was at the edge of something new in that space just before you begin. On your mark, get set, and so that is just the opening of the book.
And that's so great. That's so awesome. I haven't really taught a lot of fiction, but the little bit I have taught, I'm always telling students, just start your books fast. You know, don't make people wait. And that's like exactly what this does, right? Like she's getting inseminated. There's already, we have this idea that there was a romantic encounter the last night. So she doesn't even know who the father is going to be. And that's going to come into play. And when the book jumps ahead, there are the babies who are now the adult children that are living at home. And so it's terrific. And like that opening season, it also gives us Will, who's kind of like the father figure to these children. And he's already, you can see the importance in his life. So you do that all in 2 pages. And so it's pretty fun.
Yeah, well, it was, I mean, I do think it's fun to just dive in and not feel like you have to start by going backwards before you just go forwards.
No, so you just jump right in, and you already care about this character, Bridget, so much because there's like just so much at stake. And she's also just so like, okay, I'll do this. And at the very beginning, it's such a major decision, and she's sort of so offhand about it in a way that's really lovely and endearing.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then Bridget, I mean, there's so many excellent characters in this book. Like, I don't know, did you count how many characters you have?
It's a lot of characters. I think there are 10 very important characters.
Yeah. But she, of course, is our main one. And so you have to love Bridget, like for all of her flaws. I'm just telling all your readers that it's just not optional whether or not. She's just so easy to love. So that's really great.
Well, and Will, I wanted Will to also be, I don't know if you find this difficult, but everyone talks about likable characters and that characters should be likable or shouldn't they be likable. And I'm sort of on the fence about that because I like unlikable people. So I'm a little bit in a weird situation with that. Mm-hmm. Will, I did want to be likable, but I didn't want him to be too good. Like I didn't want to be too good to be true. So that's always interesting too. If you have a character and you want them to be somebody lovely, you have to give them enough of an edge that they don't make people want to vomit. They're so good.
They have to be both, right? Yeah. A little bit more complicated.
Yeah. You must get that. Like with Bad Marie, I mean.
You're supposed to like a woman who's kidnapped a baby. And I was really surprised after that book was published how people really disliked her. I'm like, you dislike Marie? And she kidnapped a child, so.
I loved Marie.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so that's always a trick. And so, I mean, Bridget is keeping major secrets from her children and from the possible father. So, I mean, people could be offended by that, but I certainly wasn't. It all made sense to me because you convinced me. And so you've got really great plot going on in this book. And I think plot is something that some people don't take seriously enough. Like they want beautiful sentences, which I absolutely do, but I love a great plot. And so,
yes,
I think,
and I think triangles are very interesting. This musical
about triangles, right?
Yeah. It was originally actually a quartet until I suddenly remembered, no. For my narrative purposes, a trio is so much more interesting. Yeah. But I wanted there to be something that kept the stakes really high among the 3 of them. So there's Will and there's Bridget. Will plays the piano, Bridget plays the cello, and then there's the missing empty chair where the violinist fills in. And Gavin was the original. Yeah. Bringing him back or not to bring him back, I just wanted that to be sort of a loaded, important, where we, for both Bridget and Will, there would be a lot at stake of having this person come back again in terms of having things that they've done in the past and ways that they'd even wronged him, even though he is considered to be sort of insufferable and arrogant. And
then you get into his point of view, suddenly he's not. That's the wonderful thing about point of view. I think whenever you're in somebody's head, it's hard not to like them because everything they do suddenly makes sense because you're thinking with them. And so I think that's what's really great.
Yeah,
And
there were a lot of heads to get into.
yeah, so many. I mean, you actually mentioned this. I watched you do another interview with Pamela of Excelsior Bookstore because I wanted to see what you talked about. And you actually mentioned one of your favorite minor characters, and she was absolutely my favorite character too. And her name is Jackie, and she's the intern who works for his father, who's just wildly successful and very rich. And she takes this job so seriously, and she comes and she's wearing like professional business clothes in the summer, and she's just very nervous, and she gets invited to a dinner party. And at this dinner party, everybody's just they're so nice to her, and they're just so nice, and everyone's just getting wildly drunk. And there's something so nice about adult kids doing that in front of their mom and how natural that seems. And it was just a sort of magical scene until Jackie just rose up violently. And that actually, I mean, I feel almost embarrassed. I'll say now, like, that made me laugh out loud. So it's almost like a kid likes a fart joke. Like, I just love this throw up joke. So I love, like, I don't know if you know how funny you are while you're writing, or I'm sure people tell you that all the time.
Well, I do know that I have one of the characters say in the book that throwing up is her favorite emotion. and I do have to say, I just think vomiting is hilarious.
Unless you're the one actually vomiting, and then it's not so fun.
No, it's not fun at all when you're actually doing it. Do you know that I have yet to write a book where this, without a double negative, every book I've written has someone throw up in it.
Oh, there you go.
And I was thinking for my next book, you know, I had 3 kids, and I named and I'm Amy. I named the first one Alex. I named the next one Andrew. And I decided like I had to have another child just to show it wasn't a theme of naming all my children names would start with A.
Yeah.
I had my 3rd kid named him Luke just to make the point. Like, I don't have to name my children A. So I with someone who vomits in it. I can do this. And I'm working very hard on my 4th book right now, and someone threw up. Somebody already threw up.
Somebody's already thrown up?
Already.
Oh, that's so good. It's like maybe you should have a checklist. You know, things you have to have your characters do. And one thing, just so like I thought with my own writing out, I've had sea lions in 2 books, which seems like an awful lot. Like for and the second time I put sea lions in a book, I thought, am I allowed to do this? And then I just thought, well, why not? Like, I feel like if you're writing, you might as well really entertain yourself. Like, you're your first reader, always. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I'm glad to know that we can anticipate throwing up in your next book. I'm sure in the chat they're all like, that's so exciting.
I have to tell you, I don't think I made it. I'm going to try to think. I'm trying to think. I think it's on the second or third page.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And it wasn't like I literally was not trying to do, I mean, if anything, I was fighting against it, but I
just had to get it out of the way, I think. Yeah.
I needed to throw up.
Well, I won't even ask you about your new book because that's just too much pressure. Oh, look, you brought a dog. Wait, now it's like a competition. 1 second.
This is Pepper. I didn't think you.
So this actually, I didn't know what I was going to ask you next, but the thing I'm going to ask you next is there are so many animals in this book. And do you want to talk about that? Because I think they are really characters. Like, they really play an important role. They're like these enormous dogs, and there's a cat that runs away, and a parrot. And
well, I mean, I just think pets, I'm going to let this guy go. See?
Yeah, my cat's already gone.
Yeah. They tell you so much about the people who own them also. Yeah. I think pets set a scene, and I think they set a mood, and I think they inform a lot about the character. The pet can tell you something about the character of the person who owns them. So yes, there are big dogs. There's a parrot. There are 2 cats. And it's so funny, again, well, we can talk about my book trailer in a minute, but
oh, yeah.
I've said many times now that in a lot of strange ways, I've sort of had, life imitating art in terms of we all got locked down, and I suddenly ended up at my house in Connecticut, which is falling down even more than usual. And my adult kids moved back home, and just a lot of things started to happen. But one of the things that happened is I took my city cat out to Connecticut, and she always told you I have the biggest asshole cat.
She likes to lie on puzzles.
I have the meanest cat in the world, and she's gone wild. She has become murderous. I mean, I can't keep her in, but every time she goes out, she kills another mouse. She kills.
Yeah, she comes back. She brings you. So that's a sign of love, isn't it?
She brings it into the house alive.
Right.
So we had a snake in the house the other day that she brought in. And then she brought in one animal. I didn't know what it was. I literally looked at this thing and I was like, it's not a mouse. It's not a rat. We don't have rats there. I'm like, what is it? And I looked it up and it's a vole.
Oh, good. You've also, just because I don't know if anybody of you follow Amy on Instagram, but I mean, it's still like Connecticut is not a dream, and she doesn't have air conditioning in her home. But sometimes I look at the pictures, and she's had bear visitors this summer, and they're just sort of magical, right? Can you tell them about your bears?
We have a big mother bear and 3 babies who come by. We haven't seen them in a little while. I hope they're okay.
Yeah.
I think they haven't been by in about 3 weeks, I want to say. But we have bobcats and we have turkeys and deer, and that's all fine as long as they're out. I don't love it when my cat brings things in.
No, not large animals. And then if you rewrote the book, I wonder if you would put bears in, because they weren't actually in this novel.
I know, you asked that, and I think that you're absolutely right. I would definitely.
We always want to change things. It's better not to. I think your book is perfect the way it is. You don't need bears. One thing I just wanted to ask, because I think this is just so interesting, and I always find, like, when I hear writers talk about their process, like, I'm always just so greedy when I get to watch other writers talk, and I really love it. And I didn't really think about or process it that you didn't write your first book until you were 50 years old, and this is your 3rd book, and I just feel like that's really inspirational and really wonderful and actually pretty brave. And I bet people would like to hear about how you decided to start writing and make this your new career.
I mean, I think there was always part of me that kind of thought that this was something that I wanted to do. You were like that forever, right? You always knew this was what you wanted.
Well, I was like, you know, there's like these awards like Writers Under 30 or the Writers Under 35, like the New York Public Library Lions. And I think I was 36 when I got my first book published. So I already blew that window. I waited too long. So yeah, it's hard. Those young wonderkins. I don't know how they do it.
I know. I don't either. I think I needed to be 50 to start this. I just feel like I was ready. I liked the idea of it, but I just don't think I was quite ready to do it. I always knew I wanted a life that had something to do with books or with plays or something. So that was the reason I ended up teaching high school English. And when people asked me what I wanted to be when I was really young, I always said a librarian, because I thought if you love books and you want to be around books, you know, that to me, as somebody who went to the library a lot as a little kid, I thought that was the absolute obvious thing to do, was to become a librarian. So instead I became an English teacher and always loved plays. So I always just had this feeling that I wanted to write something. So I actually started by writing a play.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Which was Small Admissions.
Oh,
I had written one book before that, a sort of a Southern story that it's my book in the drawer. You know, it's my unpublished book, which I think a lot of people have one of those. So I started writing this play about the admissions world in New York, and my agent asked me if I could maybe turn that into a novel.
That was a good suggestion.
And it's interesting, like since then, you know, you were asking about process. I start with dialogue, always. So it makes sense.
So you just write a theme with all that, like, right. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Start with basically 2 people talking, and then I sort of have to do a lot of work to build out from there. But yeah, I think mostly, most comfortably when I'm thinking in dialogue. And I don't ever want to add dialogue tags. I don't want to add what anyone's doing. That's the part that I have to do later so that there's actually a book.
Okay, well, that's good. But as long as characters aren't like exclaiming or, you know, ejaculating when they talk, you know, you're good. You're golden. So you're doing it just right when you put them in.
I put in as few as, I mean, I don't want my readers to ever be lost or confused about who's speaking, but but if I could do it just as a script format, that would probably be my first choice. So Marcy, I wanted to ask you, because I was interviewed recently somewhere, and somebody asked me about fiction and coincidence, like using coincidence in fiction. And I said in this interview, oh my gosh, I said, Marcy Dermansky talked during her book launch about the role of coincidence in her writing, and she said, and then I just drew a big old 55-year-old blank brain. I could not remember what you had said. I remembered that I liked what you said. I don't know if you remember what you said.
don't think I remember what I said either. I think in real life, I think I just love coincidences. I think they just please me so much. And so I think that when I write fiction, I put in more coincidences than what might happen normally. Because every time I write one, I'm like, oh, that's so wonderful. But I think there's just this way that books sort of grow and develop. Like, I think that you create these characters and their emotions so that you can make them happen. And then I think I talked to you before, like, I write things that please me. Like in Very Nice, I put one character on an airplane and one of the characters is a pilot. So I'm like, oh, I could have the pilot be flying that plane. And I just felt happy. And I don't know about your writing process, because I think it's interesting to talk about. A lot of people, when they talk about writing, they're just like, wrote a paragraph today, it was miserable, but I'm so happy I have these words. And I know writing is really hard, but when writing is going well, I find it's really pleasurable because these things just happen. And I think coincidences for me are one of the pleasures of writing. I don't know.
I feel that way. That's what it was. Now I can quote you. No, I agree completely. I love a good coincidence. I love life also, and I agree. No, I definitely, like you, when the writing is going well, the editing part is so hard, and knowing that you have to throw out 30 pages because they didn't work can be.
Yeah, sometimes like the blank page is better than fixing things. So fixing things can be good too, but it's nice. Yes. It's nice to see what comes into your head, right? And then these characters start talking to you, and you're like, oh my God, they just said this? And so, did your characters surprise you while you were writing?
I wouldn't say they surprise me. I think it's more what you said, that I love to put awesome things in their mouths to say. I love to have somebody come up with a good line, or for someone to say something that's just the right thing for them to say in that moment, and to not be corny. Like I resist corniness because I don't do that well. I don't do earnest well.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be too snarky either. So it's always sort of finding a balance of.
And it's great when you're writing because your characters can be much more clever than you are because they're not quite on the spot. You get to go fix their dialogue, right?
Exactly. Yes. And sometimes one of the easiest fixes for me is throwing out almost every other line. It can be so tight, it's so pleasurable to make it really tight and nice, So that's something that I try to do. And then of course I have like the writers that I just want to copycat, the writers that I've been reading for so long who I think are so clever and good, and I just want to do what they do. So
that's really nice. Yeah.
I do a lot of reading. I love Stephen Macaulay. I've been reading him since I think 1990 or something. And I love Eleanor Lippman. I love you. I love Terry McMillan. There are just so many writers that who write complicated families well and complicated friendships well. And those are the people who I just admire so much.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And then when you write, you have your own style, but you can kind of draw from all the books that you love too. So that's a nice thing.
Yeah, well, it's sort of what you were saying, what I like to do is do something that is very pleasurable to read, and those are the books that I read that give me so much pleasure. So you have to do it. You have to do it in your own way. That's
right. I think sometimes books that bring people pleasure, sometimes, not all the times, like not as a rule, but I feel like they're not quite as valued as much because they're just so enjoyable. And I think maybe it's really hard to write an enjoyable book. I think it's like, if they come up effortless, they just seem like, oh, well, this is just a trifle, and they can be overlooked. And so
that is true. And it's not easy. Like this book was difficult. There's no reason why anybody would know this, but I do have a structure that I really try to
talk about that.
Where I had it's written in groups of 3s. So Bridget always gets a chapter, Will always gets a chapter, and then there's an empty spot, a placeholder that is always filled by somebody else. And the only person who gets repeated chapters is Gavin, who's he's the violinist who makes his big return. So I thought I could justify him making a return. And he's more important anyway, so we hear from him 3 times. But it was a fun challenge to figure out who needs to tell the next part of this.
Right. That's great. I think structure really helps you write too, right? You're like, oh, I did Bridget's, now I do Will, and then you do this. And it's so like, sometimes if you don't know what to do next, your book is telling you what to do. So I think structure is really great.
Right. I mean, I think poets certainly find that works for them at times to just, think of a structure that you want to fit your thoughts into and try to do that. Having no structure, I'm working on my 4th book and I have not worked out the structure yet, and that's the problem. Like, I already know, like, that's the problem that I'm having.
When you hit that, then you'll really get into your groove. Yeah,
for sure.
And I think one thing I think you wanted to talk about is like, well, there's just always this idea about autofiction, and I don't know if that's good or bad, or people feel like if you're stealing from your life, it's cheating, which I don't agree. But I think you had this wonderful thing happen where you wrote a book, and then your book just sort of really imitated what was coming next. And there was no way for you to know that could happen, right? I mean,
no way for me to. I mean, there were certain things, having the falling down house was something that I had to begin with, but no, So I think they're going to put the clip to the book trailer. We did
so lovely. I hope everybody watches it when this is done. It made me laugh out loud. Yeah.
So much fun.
And I'm just really disappointed that you don't have a glass of wine for the chat, by the way, because, oh, there you go. See, we were ready. She's got for champagne even. Sorry, I'm just joking.
Yeah, no, yes, I mean, it was very odd to sort of, well, I think this whole thing has been such a shit show, what we're all living through, and I think it's so crazy, and I think it's so crazy that we don't know where this is going and for how long. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of picturing my fall. I don't know about you, but you
try not to think about fall.
Have a child, so yes, I mean, not knowing what's happening with school, all of that, I keep just trying to say to myself, it'll be a great chance to not travel and be less distracted and write.
That's a great tagline. Great chance to not travel. I think that should be on billboards.
Yes, that'll be the bumper sticker.
Right.
COVID-19. Mm-hmm. It's just, this is crazy. Everybody, I think everyone I've been talking to has had days where they're sort of coping well and they decide to exercise or read a book. And I think everyone is having days where they just cannot function right now. I mean, it's just too much. Like, you just start to cry because what.
So it's great that you're working on a book right now, by the way. I think that really helps. I think in the beginning of this pandemic, I had trouble reading, and now I find reading to be like really enjoyable. Like I hit my limit of how much TV I could watch, and now I really want books, and I want the quiet. And I love
TV. I love Netflix. I can't, for some reason, I don't know what's going on, but I can't enjoy TV right now.
Yeah.
I'm loving reading. So that has been great. And I'm really loving audiobooks. And I have to
tell you that you take walks and you listen to books, right?
Ridiculously long walks. Sometimes I go like 6 miles and I listen. I'm listening to Michelle Obama right now, Becoming.
Nice.
So much fun to have her voice in my head and listen to her story. It's like a little mini vacation, which is the best we can do. But I have to say a quick plug for the audiobook for Musical Chairs. I have 5 narrators, and I just kind of flipped through the chat. I'd heard their voices before, but I hadn't gotten to hear them read before. And I flipped through today, and it's so much fun. It's so great. It is amazing. It's just they did a really brilliant job. Carly Robbins, who I think might even be on here tonight, the audience, she did an amazing job. It's a really fun cast of characters, which is perfect for a big cast of characters.
That's great. I mean, when I met you, it was at a Les Blue Salon series, and you're actually the person who had done your audiobook was at the event, and I had this conversation with her, and she was really upset with me because I had never listened to the audiobook for The Red Car.
That's Carly, who I think
okay. Oh, so she's listening. Tell her I'm sorry. And with very nice, I know there are 5 different really professional voice actors, and I actually haven't been able, but I think I would love to try listening to an audiobook, but I think I will not try with my own, but I think it's something I want to begin to do. A friend told me recently that they just listened to the whole new Kevin Kwan book while they were cleaning their kitchen. So that sounds kind of like, well, that's not fair to literature, but if it's making something in your life that's unpleasant more pleasant, that seems great.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I can't just sit and listen. I can drive, walk, and I can do a task as long as it doesn't involve, like, I don't know, part of my brain, I guess. Like if it's a really sort of easy to do task, I can do that. I could load the dishwasher and listen. Yeah. But I'm telling you, if anyone out there is having a reading.
Okay, well, I'm going to start. It's my new.
get it, take a walk, get your
that's the way to get out of it.
I'm such a mom, and just take a walk and listen. It's so much fun.
Sure. So I think like in a couple of minutes, I'm going to start taking questions. I can just feel all this energy in the chat. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about, or?
Well, what are you reading right now?
I'm reading in a book. I always forget the title. Like You Exist. I'm reading You Exist Too Much, because it's just the premise of it is just so fantastic, about a Palestinian lesbian coming out story. And I'm like, oh, that's just so awesome. So I'm reading that right now. And I feel like, and I don't remember the author's name, which is really rude, and I apologize to the author, but I feel like I always love a coming of age novel. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, and I hope that when I'm much older, I'm still going to like these coming of age books. So I'm reading that. And I feel really lucky that I just got a galley of Rumen Anand's new book that's just got option for film. Yeah, so that's going to be my next.
That was such good news. So
yeah, big news. Yeah. And so, what are you reading, Amy?
I just finished reading The Nothing by Henry Qureshi. Is that how you say it? Is that how you say it? I read that one because my next book has a narrator who's an older woman. She's in her 80s, and it's first person. I'm going from all these narrators that it just kind of wore me out. I just decided for this book, I wanted to do something completely different. So at the moment, this next book is first person.
Nice.
Perspective of this older woman. So when I found out about The Nothing, I just was dying to read it. It's an older man. He's bedridden, well, wheelchair bound, and he's very snarky, and he's a former filmmaker, and he's in bed, and he can hear his wife having sex in the next room. And it's just,
almost sounds like a Hitchcock film. So yeah, that sounds great.
Really intriguing. And it's just a little.
Like, I think the last thing I want to say about the main character of Bridget, it starts where she thinks she's going to have this romantic summer that does not happen, and she gets broken up with email. But I think there's this really great thing about older women characters, and so sometimes there's like this new interest in them. There was just an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about a bunch of great books, one by Robin Wasserman and one by Emma Straub, and it mentioned very nice about older women and their life stories. And so the thing about Bridget is, like, this guy doesn't work out for her, but then the story doesn't end up being a caretaker of her children, and it's also not about her getting together with Will. And all of a sudden, all these sort of wonderful men come from the sky who are interested in her, and I love that. And I love that she like figures out a way, like, oh, I'm going to change my career, and how empowering that is. And so there's some really nice stuff that happens that you might not expect.
Well, I think that a lot of women at around 50 years old, you sort of have this opportunity.
Yeah, so nice.
To be completely different. You know, if you've been raising kids, they're kind of grown up and on their own 2 feet. And if you've been, I mean, I've switched jobs so many times. So I'm always someone who, I have no problem with sort of major career shifts in midlife. I think it's sometimes a really good thing to just try something different. So I didn't want to get saved by a romance. I'm not somebody who, I don't know, I love romance. I love reading romance, but in my books, I don't tend to want the romance to save the day. I want something else to save the day. That's certainly.
You turn it on its head, because the people who get married are not who you would expect to get married. And so there's something nice about that. Yeah. So I hope everybody is just so crazy, excited to read Musical Chairs now, right after this conversation.
Well, and I just want to give a shout out to Strand, that if anyone has not bought Musical Chairs, you can get a signed book plate if you buy it from the Strand. If you already have my book, please buy one of Marcy's books. Her book, Very Nice, just came out in paperback. So support the Strand by buying Very Nice if you are musical chaired out. Or buy something else with the Strand. But they just opened a branch at their store, and we've got to support our indie bookstores, and they're so great to do events like this. So I'm just very, very grateful.
Yeah. Okay, so I just opened, it's not in the chat, but I have a Q&A screen, and I see 4 questions, and I bet there are more, but I'll start with what I can see.
Okay.
The first question is from Susie Schnell, and she says, I'd love Amy to talk about the research she did in being able to include all of the classical music.
So
I was very impressed. Also, I wish I had accompaniment while I was reading it. That's really nice, right? We should have a playlist that people should listen to while they read your book.
So nice. So I have no background whatsoever in music. I didn't grow up playing the piano. I didn't learn to read music. I do love classical music. I love attending the symphony. I hope that's something that we can do again in the future soon. When I go, I usually go with my son, my 20-year-old, because he's studying classical music. And when we go, he listens, like he's really paying attention and listening. I'm enjoying it in this other way that musicians enjoy it. In fact, I sometimes think I do my absolute best thinking in the symphony. I thought up most of what I wanted to write for Limelight sitting in a symphony. I just find it's so lovely to just sit and listen to these incredibly capable people play these beautiful pieces of music. Problem is that if you ask me the next day, what was it that I just listened to, there's a good possibility that I'm not going to be able to hum it for you or tell you what it was. But I have this kid. I have 3 musical kids. I don't know how that happened. The oldest and the youngest are both pursuing music professionally. So to have that resource in my house was kind of an amazing thing. And my youngest, Luke, was endlessly helpful at giving me suggestions. I would say, this is what they're doing. What would they be listening to? Like, or they're going to just, they're planning to, Bridget's planning to audition. What would maybe the, what would the choices be of pieces that she needs to play? And to have that right there was, I mean, thank you, Luke. Thank you. It was so much fun. We're planning to put a Spotify list together of the music.
Great idea. Yeah.
I did do a list already. I'll try to think of what it is and I'll post it in the chat after. But it's a list of that Luke helped me write. It's a list of classical pieces to listen to in different situations. So something to listen to if you're working. It won't be too distracting, but you'll like to have.
Yeah, it's important. You don't want.
Exercise.
Sometimes I listen to music that has words, but I've just listened to the same things over and over again, so I don't actually hear it. So that's the way I get away with that.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that your adult children are proving to be useful to you. You know what I mean?
Useful. Yeah. So, and then I went to Marcia Butler, who's an amazing.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Marcia, who wrote Pickle's Progress, loved that book. I brought her a draft pretty early on, and she was so helpful because we got on the phone and she would say, okay, we got to talk, where's the money coming from? Like, how successful are they? And I was like, they're not here, but they're not here. She's like, okay, well, let's talk about how much they're traveling. Let's talk about how much money they're making. Let's talk about whether or not their website is functioning. So she helped me really with the business and the life and the schedule and the finances of a small classical trio. So that was really
How would you know that otherwise? That's good. Yeah. And Susie had one other question for you, and she said she'd love to hear the behind the scenes and making of the book trailer and how involved your family was in the script and the filming and the editing. And was it an enjoyable project to do with your family?
It was so much fun. It was very bonding. When I started to realize that I knew no book tour was going to happen, and I wasn't going to get to sort of be face to face other than this, which is also great. But when I knew I wasn't traveling anywhere, I just had this feeling that I needed to kind of get the word out a little bit and tell people something about the book, give them sort of something about the tone of the book and something about me and my family. Mm-hmm. And I thought, here we are, we're out there in Connecticut, and my adult kids are home and the house is falling apart. And I was like, what if I did this? And I wrote a script. And we did one full rough draft. I mean, we shot the entire thing and ended up throwing the whole thing out and starting over again.
Oh, you did.
And just because when we watched it, like, we could figure out what worked and what didn't work. My kids were great. My husband was great. Everyone was a good sport about it. And then my son Alex did most of the editing. Luke did the background music. So it was all hands on deck. Everybody pitched in for this. I'm so grateful. And also, having said, while I'm seizing the floor, that I'm so grateful to Emily Bessler and my publishing house and everybody. You know how it is. I mean, it takes such a team to make this happen. Kathleen Carter is so amazing, and Megan, Isabel, and Emily Bessler, and my agent Linda. They're all so fantastic.
That's so great. It's even like now when everybody's sort of working from home, I feel like it's so much, the hard work that your team is helping you, it's even so much more gratifying. I know it's still their jobs, but when they're doing this for you during the pandemic, it just feels so much more meaningful. So
change circumstances. We're sort of scratching our heads and saying, what does this look like now? I mean,
Right.
if we're not assuming that people can just walk into any bookstore anywhere and just see book, then what are we doing?
Right. We miss that, but there's some fun stuff happening. Like, this is fun. I didn't have to get a babysitter for tonight and go to New York City, so there you go. Yeah. So this question we already sort of tapped on a little in the conversation, and I always feel like you don't have to answer this, but Meredith Shore wants to know, what are you working on right now? And she has grabby hands, so she already wants it.
Oh, that's so sweet. Hi, Meredith.
Yeah.
I am working on a book that is about, it's back in New York City. It's in the location is really a big brownstone very near Greenwich Village, which is my neighborhood in New York. And it's 4 women. So the narrator is this older woman in her 80s. And then there's a 25-year-old, a 45-year-old, and a 65-year-old. And because of the actions, accidental as they may have been, of the 45-year-old, she sort of screws up the lives of the 25-year-old and the 65-year-old. Not on purpose, but she did some things that kind of screwed up their lives, and she doesn't even know them. It was sort of inadvertent. And so the story is just about how the 4 of them their lives end up intersecting. It's a comedy. So that's what
That's good. Yeah, I'm glad you're saying the comedy. I think we want that.
It up on the second page, because apparently that's what I do. I don't know.
We know there's throwing up, so everybody's rest assured it's going to be there. It's good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a comedy, and it's certainly about life being very messy, and it's definitely about, it's very multi-generational, and it's, I would say again, because I love reinvention, it's about characters needing to reinvent themselves.
That sounds really great.
Very awkward circumstances. I have a kid party that goes really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's nothing funnier than a kid party that just goes off the rails wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a pre-corona book if there's a kids party.
Yeah. I mean, this is what other people are asking. I feel like we're just going to discover that as we go. Like, I worry when I write now, like if you're not writing about corona, if it's not relevant or worth reading. And at the same time, do we want to read everything that's about corona? So we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
You know,
my dad's a doctor. He said,
so,
this will be behind us someday. There's going to be a vaccine.
Yeah.
Going to be we will go back to normal. It's very reassuring.
Yeah, and we will, and this will be written about, but it doesn't have to be written about right now. Like, sometimes I feel like when people write about things while they're happening, it's too soon, and we haven't had a chance to process it yet. So yeah. So Georgia Clark, she wants to know. She says, "Hi, Amy," and she wants to know. Says, "So many fun characters in this one, and who was the most fun to write and why?"
Hi, Georgia. I always say that I think Jackie was the most fun to write because the cast of characters know each other so well. And I think it's so fun to bring in an outsider and to have them see the people that you've already sort of established on the page in this whole new way. It's just such an opportunity as a writer to get to see them again and to sort of discover things about them that maybe you didn't think of when you sort of bring someone new in. So that was really fun. Edward, my very sort of famous conductor composer, I wanted him to have a voice, but when I went to write his chapter, I just struggled, and I was like, why am I not feeling like I can write for him? And I decided it's because he needs to make a toast. It's just what Edward does. He likes to be in the spotlight and take the floor, and so I decided that I would have Edward's chapter be in the form of a toast. Wait till you hear it on audiobook. It's so good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But writing that toast was so fun, and it was way too long. It was hard work to cut it because I knew Edward would write a speech that was too long.
Right.
I can't have that in the book if it's too long. So I had to do my best to sort of be as economical as possible and still have him rattle quotes off the top of his head and be the way Edward is. And that chapter was a lot of fun to write. And also, it was just tying up a lot of loose ends from him. So that was really pleasurable to do.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions. Let's see that we'll do the best that we can. Jamie Brenner says she's fascinated and impressed that you could switch from writing third person to first. And has it changed the way you plot? And does it make it more challenging?
So Jamie knows I'm a pantser, but I really decided, partly because of my writer friends who are such good outliners, that I would try to do something resembling an outline with this next book. And so far, it has actually held up. I've thrown a ton of it out and sort of I've had to rethink several things. But I did, for the first time ever, sort of map the book out loosely from the beginning. So that was really new for me. So maybe that's part of what's helping me. This was one of these books where I thought I was going to do I thought I was going to write it in third person from 3 characters. And when it just wasn't working, and I wasn't having fun. It's like you said, Marcy, I wasn't enjoying it. And maybe it's because I had just done this. It just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't clicking, and I wasn't feeling sort of lit up when I was working. And when I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, no, I've got the wrong narrator this whole time. And I realized that it was going to come with challenges, because if you have a first person narrator, how does she know a lot of the things that she knows if she's not present for everything? Where did the information come from? So that was a huge thing for me to solve. I remembered reading Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which I just loved.
Yeah.
And the way that story was told. So you're going to hear my dog playing with his squeaky toy.
I heard that.
I apologize. But yeah, so I was sort of just thinking about an interesting way that I could tell this story and not have it be from those 3 women. And as soon as I made that switch, I was super motivated, really excited, just excited to sort of figure out who this woman is. Yeah,
Oh, great.
that was the right answer in terms of solving this book's problem.
Right. And there's always this nice thing in writing. There's always this, like, I don't know, I think for every writer, you get to a point where you just think, oh, I actually can't do this book. I don't know what's going to happen next. And this is just dumb. And I've just wasted all this time. And then you have an aha moment. And it's just pretty wonderful, right? So I'm glad to hear you had one. Amy White wants to know, do you have any plans to write anything set in Texas, which is where you're from?
And who asked that? So cute.
Amy White.
Oh, Amy. Okay. So, hi, Amy. The first book I ever wrote that is unpublished is a book that takes place in East Texas. I was thinking, actually, because my husband really likes that book. He still thinks that that's a book that needs to see the light of day sometime. And I was kind of thinking that the way that I turned Small Admissions, which was a play, into a novel, that maybe that book is my novel that I need to turn into a play or a screenplay, but probably a play, because I don't know how to write a screenplay. So so I'm thinking about turning that story about Rodney. It's called Separate Bedrooms. I'm thinking about turning that one back into a play or revisiting it at some point. I think I will revisit that story at some point.
Okay.
It's a common.
There are more questions, and I don't know if we're going to go over at 7:59, but you have a question from someone who I think might be related to you, from Alex Poeppel. And he says, hey mom, what's for dinner? So we can just ignore that question, because I think that's the appropriate response, right?
Oh, I love that.
So, yeah. Lori Albanese, who we both know, she says, Amy, your sons are musicians. Do you borrow musician behaviors from them? Are any of your characters based on them in any way?
I do think in some ways that Luke is a 20-year-old version of 50-year-old Will.
That's funny.
There's something, and that's a compliment to both Will and to Luke.
Okay.
He's a really good person. And he's very serious about his music, and he's a pianist, as my son is. So yes, I think, and certainly I cannot begin to tell you how much Luke, who's studying classical music now, his practice habits and the pieces that he played and all of that. You know, I've been driving this now to music lessons since he was 5 years old. So being around music and knowing what it's like to be practicing and what it's like to do recitals and rehearsals and all that is something that that's really ingrained in me now after all of these years. So, and yeah, I think Will and Luke have a lot in common.
That's so interesting that you took your son and you aged him. I like that. We can do whatever we want. I really like that about writing. As long as we don't make people too angry. Like, I don't want to do that ever. Do you know?
No, no. It's always, I think, in the most flattering possible way.
Right. So hopefully you're not going to get into trouble with this book, but you don't have to answer that right now. And let's see.
I'm still thinking about what's for dinner.
Oh my God. Well, it is officially, I don't know how this works. It's 8:01. So I think, are we supposed to end at 8? Do you have a couple more questions? Do you want to just wave at your friends?
Can I say thank you one more time to Marcy for doing this? Thank you, Marcy. You know, you're just one of my favorite writers in the world.
That's so nice.
And
I kept saying to Amy, are you sure you don't want to ask somebody else? I think I asked her that 3 times. So
no, I was very, very sure about that. And just yes, please support the Strand. Please, if you've already bought my book, please consider buying one of Marcy's books.
we'll look the
or
cover.
any
Yeah.
one of the books that we've talked about tonight. There's so much good reading. Just your Susie's book again. There's just so much good stuff, and it'll keep you from going crazy during these very, very difficult times.
Well said. Yeah. And the sentiment of like being burnt out on TV, it's like really going hard into books. That I feel that. So truthfully, I just want to say thank you to both of you for doing this event with us tonight. Sorry to anyone whose questions we didn't get to. We got a lot of questions, but thank you for asking them. And I have shared once again the link to musical chairs in the chat. We still have some copies with signed book plates, which is very fun. So be sure to grab one of those. And yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone so much for coming. I'm so grateful. Just my friends and family and everyone who came. And thank you, Strand. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Good night.